joyful and triumphant. Come ye, oh come ye to Bethlehem. Come and behold him, born the King of angels. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Sing, choirs of angels, sing in exaltation. Sing, all ye citizens of heaven above. Glory to God, glory in the highest. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Yea, Lord, we greet thee, born this happy morning. Jesus, to thee be the glory given. Word of the Father, now in flesh appearing. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him. Oh come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord. Oh come, let us adore him, Christ the Lord.
Hey everyone, my name is Andrew, and I just want to extend the warmest of welcomes to you this morning. If you are joining us online or in person, whatever it is, we are super glad that you're here. All right, I know that you count on me to tell you when Christmas is. So, we are 5 days, 12 hours, 20 minutes, and 19 seconds away from Christmas. We're less than a week away from Christmas, which means that we are only about 4 days away from our Christmas Eve service, which is this Friday. We're super excited about it. It's going to be at Lightridge High School at 5 p.m. If you missed our announcement last week, we are not going to be at the Middlebrook Barn for Christmas Eve. We are going to be at Lightridge High School. And we're super excited about that because it means that we get to celebrate Christmas Eve with you in our new church home. And we think that's awesome. We think that's great. It starts at 5 p.m., but you're going to want to get there a little bit earlier because we're going to be serving hot chocolate, and you're going to want to get some of that before you go into the experience so you don't miss anything. Okay, so Lightridge High School, 5 p.m. Invite a friend. I'm super excited for it. Okay, and then when we finish out the year, as we roll into 2022, we are diving into a really cool series. It's a relationship series. But what's super special about this relationship series is it's not just going to be Pastor Brad, it's also going to be Amy as well. Pastor Brad and Amy are going to be leading us through this series on relationships, and they're going to be talking about the ins and outs of relationships, the hard, the challenging, the good, and the encouraging. And it's not just a dating, or a marriage series. It's about relationships in general, which applies to all of us. So you're going to want to be there. It's going to be really helpful, really insightful, and I'm super excited for that. All right, tonight, this one's really special to me. Tonight is our 45 Christmas party. This is the last gathering for the 45 of 2021. If you haven't heard anything about it, seen any emails, I'm telling you now, students, you're going to want to be there. We're going to have a gingerbread making house competition. We're going to have a white elephant gift exchange. We're going to have fun. Everybody's going to be there. It's going to be a great time. All right. So if you need any more information, you can come talk to me after, or you can email, text me, whatever is easiest for you. I want to see you there though. All right. So make it a priority to get there, students. All right, guys. I hope that you enjoy the rest of this experience. Brad is continuing the Making Room series, which has just been so great, right? So enriching and so invigorating for us to be able to live into what Jesus calls us to in relationship with other people and with bringing others in. So enjoy the message, and I will see you next time.
Wow, it's the last Sunday before Christmas. Late last night, I got home at 1 a.m. after seeing Spider-Man No Way Home. And it was amazing to be in a packed theater where every single theater in the whole building was sold out. Every seat was filled. And what a great movie, by the way. People were cheering and applauding, crying. It really felt good. And you know, the title, Spider-Man No Way Home, just had me emotionally coming back to the reality. And we're not talking about superheroes. We're not talking about fictional stories, that God came to this planet. He came here. Emmanuel, God with us, to dwell among us, to live among us in order to make a way home for us, to make room for us, for people like you and me. So I want to go back just a couple months ago. We talked on a Sunday about one of our core values, being outsiders. And the way we specifically say it is that loving outsiders is the point. Throughout church history and church tradition, churches all around the world, particularly in the West, have tried to make insiders the point. We've tried to make ourselves the point. But Jesus made it absolutely clear. It's clear in every single story. Every nuance, every part of the narrative of Jesus' life, that outsiders were the point. He did not come for insiders. He didn't come for the religious elite or those who thought they understood religion. He didn't come for those who promoted themselves as holy. He came for the unclean. He came for the broken. He came for the lonely. He came for the irreligious and said, I've prepared a seat at my table for you. And a lot of us spend so much of our time, so much of our energy, spiritual energy, pushing back on the idea that I could be worthy, or God must not know my past, or he must not know how I've mocked him or how I've doubted him. And just the consistent story of Jesus is, I know, and I've come close to you to make room for you. So a few weeks ago, in our Monday night group, our fire pit group, I've mentioned it. I think I've referred to it every weekend of our Christmas series. A few weeks ago, Chris Sutherland showed up, and we were talking about this idea of outsiders. It's core to who we are here at Dulles, and it's in a lot of conversations around this place we call Dulles Church. And so we were in this discussion about it, and Chris said, man, guys, I just cannot believe it. I'm still like numb or dumbfounded. He was walking, lives here in the community close to where I live, and came up on a section of sidewalk where spray painted on the sidewalk was a swastika. And we were like, wait, what? And he said, I know, guys, I stood there in shock looking at this. And so we processed it the way he did, standing there on his walk. We're like, well, wait a minute. Maybe it was some kind of a joke, but there's no scenario where painting a swastika anywhere is a joke. And so then we went down the angle of it being serious, like, well, what does that mean? And it led us into a conversation where Chris asked us the question that he asked himself that day. It really just kind of rocked Chris that day when he saw this thing, like, who or why? Like, here where we live, and it's not at all that I think or any of us think that where we live here in the Dulles area is above any other community or any other place. We're just not used to seeing a swastika in our neighborhood. And so Chris spent some time on the rest of that walk, and it sounded like the next couple days, asking himself this question that he asked us. Guys, if we were in 1940, 1941, or the world, the culture around us was very similar to Eastern Europe, and Jewish people were being collected, arrested, and sent to concentration camps, would we do what so many Christ followers in East Germany did, in Poland did? And it's not that every single person who rescued or hid in their home to protect a Jewish family was a follower of Jesus, but certainly many, many famous stories of that era were followers of Jesus so committed to him in their faith that they risked their own lives and took in many Jewish families. We know this. It's well documented. And so Chris asked, guys, would you do it? Right now today, if something happened in the next month where neighbors of ours were suddenly at risk, just innocent and at risk of losing their lives or being treated horrifically, as we know what happened in the Holocaust, would you open your home? Would you take in to a bedroom in your home? Would you hide in your home a Jewish family? And, I so appreciated the circle. We were probably 8 of us that night, 7 or 8 of us. And as we just went around and discussed it, no one said, absolutely, I would. There was more of a genuine tone to this, and you could hear everybody wrestling with this. And the collective answer we all came to was, I hope so. I hope I would do the right thing. I hope I would have the courage. I hope that I would emulate my faith in Jesus and really do what he's done for me. I hope. And so then the question was asked, where I guess it was more of a statement made, where one of the guys said, I'm confident that my answer would have been absolutely, I would do the right thing before I had children. But I'm answering this question as a father. And a lot of us are dads. And so we were agreeing like, wow, yeah, being a dad, and it's not just risking ourselves, it's risking our family and our own children. And then one of the guys asked the question, well, what if the neighbors that are strangers, maybe they live 3 streets over from you, or maybe they live, a half mile away from you in your community, but what if these neighbors that are at risk under such threat, what if they had children? Would you put, the man in our group asked all of us, would you put your own kids ahead of their kids? And so we answered more confidently that time, that round, because we're probably 20 minutes into this conversation at that point. And we said, we would most likely bring in this family. I can't imagine saying no to someone whose children are at risk. This was a dramatic conversation. And then about maybe a half hour into this conversation, another guy, I think it was Scott, said, okay, what about this scenario? What if the family in your neighborhood that's being rescued, that's being hidden, protected from arrests and concentration camps, what if that family was you? What if it was your family? What if it was you and your kids? Would you be in favor of the risk being taken at hiding? And I mean, that was the quickest part of our discussion that night. All of us collectively said, absolutely, absolutely, we would want the risk to be taken to rescue us, to rescue my kids, to hide us, to protect us. It's amazing that the Christmas story and all of its feel-good and all the movies and the traditions that we have and the warm and cozy that could be kind of the branding of Christmas, it's remarkable to me that year after year after year, and this year I read the Christmas story in July in Luke, that every time I read the story and the collection of stories of Jesus' birth, Jesus' arrival to this planet, that it's the story of God coming to make room for us, even when no room was made for him in Bethlehem. He was so determined to show us that his heart toward you and me is an invitation to his table, the most intimate expression in Judea and Galilee. 2,000 years ago in ancient Palestine, the most intimate expression of friendship or community or saying, hey, my home is now your home, was an invitation to a seat in your home, to dine with you, to break bread, to share stories, to be vulnerable, to laugh together. And that is exactly the picture that Jesus came to give us, clearly. And it wasn't just a passing like, are we sure? It's so consistent every single page. We get to Luke 14 and Jesus has risked so much to heal and make clean a man who was struggling with a disease. You go a few chapters later into Luke 17, we see the story of Jesus healing the 10 lepers where no one would go near them. Talk about quarantine. These people, these 10 men are quarantined outside of the town limits, and they're calling out to Jesus. They're trying to protect Jesus from themselves. It said that they called out to him for help but wouldn't go near him because they didn't want to make Jesus sick. Jesus heals these 10 lepers, and we know at least one of them was a foreigner, a Samaritan. He's the one that actually traveled to find Jesus later and thank him. And Jesus clearly describes that this man that he healed, that he made clean, that he invited close to him and showed mercy on, was a Samaritan, an outsider. We're also told, in the case of the Good Samaritan, Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan to answer the question of the religious arrogant. The Pharisees are asking Jesus, okay, well then, if I'm supposed to love my neighbor, if that's your greatest command, that we love God, which we do, we know everything about the Old Testament, we follow all the rules and all the rules we've made up, and you're saying the second greatest command is to love our neighbor. Who is our neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And Jesus answers the question with the story of the Good Samaritan. When the man had been beaten up and left for dead and robbed, it wasn't the faithful or the Jewish or the Pharisee who rescued him. It was the despised Samaritan who came to his rescue. The outsider who has become the insider, who's expressing Jesus. Jesus is describing the Samaritan, the despised foreigner Samaritan who the Jews hated, as the insider emulating the way of Jesus. I mean, story after story, even the story of Lazarus. Lazarus, of course, is a Jewish man. You could say religiously he's an insider, but he was a dead man. He was as unclean as you get to the nation of Israel, certainly to the religious, cultural, ethnic, and religious leaders of the Pharisees. They considered death something you never went near and never touched. Jesus goes to the ultimate outsider to give us his final sign before going to the cross, the final sign that he was God with us, that he was Emmanuel. And when he calls Lazarus out of the tomb, it's interesting, you can read this in John 11. After this long story of weeping with the sisters outside the tomb, when Jesus approaches the tomb and he's no longer weeping, he calls out in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And then there's more to the story that we read. But part of the aftermath of Lazarus being raised from the dead is that a lot of the crowd went to the Pharisees to say, oh my gosh, now he didn't just heal somebody. Now he's bringing people back from the dead. Now he's turning dead things to life. And the Pharisees call a meeting together, not to say, wow, this is God, this is the Messiah. They're so blinded by their own control, their own lust for power over the people. It says in verse 47, the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting of the Sanhedrin. And after their meeting, it says in verse 53, so from that day on, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, plotted to take Jesus' life. I mean, time after time after time, Jesus is telling us he came for the outsider. He came for the unclean. He came for the ones whom the religious people thought should not be touched, or their behavior, what they've done, what they're known for, what they're notorious for. That's a word that Luke uses, referring to the sinners Jesus hangs out with. Why does he spend so much time with notorious sinners, we're told in Luke 15? Time after time, page after page, story after story, it's the outsiders, loving the outsiders, that is the point. So much so that Jesus puts his own life at risk. The Pharisees, who would eventually crucify him, plot his death because of how he's including outsiders. He's making a way for the outsider, the religiously unclean, to come close to God. So when we go all the way back to the Christmas story, we see this right from the beginning, from the very beginning. Not only is Bethlehem considered, it is a Jewish town, it's the town of David. You could argue that it's very much an insider town because it's the town of David, but it's a very small town. It's a forgotten town. We see this even in the ancient prophecies of Isaiah, that Bethlehem is just considered like a nobody kind of place, that Jesus would be born there, not in the capital. Jesus would not be born in the palace or in Jerusalem. He would be born in Bethlehem. The story goes right into the case of the shepherds. The very first eyewitnesses invited, told that Jesus has come, Emmanuel has come, God is now here with us, and then we're invited to come see him. We're the shepherds, the no-name shepherds living out in fields. I mean, it doesn't get lower or more outside than that. Certainly from the religious elite. And you go from the shepherds worshiping, amazed, honored, praising, and worshiping God for being called, being thought of, to be included in this story. They would be the first ones to declare. Outsiders were the first ones to tell the story of Jesus' birth. We go from that story to the story of the Magi, like ethnic, cultural outsiders from the Far East that traveled. We don't know exactly how long they traveled. I mean, some indications suggest many, many months, maybe up to a year or more, that they traveled west to the land of Palestine, to the land of Israel, to see the birth of Jesus, to see baby Jesus. And it's interesting that at the end of that story, when the Magi have come to worship Jesus, Herod learns of their arrival and asks, "Why are you here?" And the Magi say, "Well, because we've been told that the king, the ultimate king, has been born." And this is a threat to Herod, who's the king of Galilee and Judea. He feels his control and power threatened at this prophecy and these words about this baby king who's been born. And so he instructs the Magi, "Oh, when you find him, come back and tell me so that I may go and worship him and take gifts to him." And of course, Herod's plot was to kill Jesus when he finds him. The Magi had been warned by God not to go back to Herod. So they go back home a different route. And when Herod realizes that he'd been deceived by the Magi, they did not obey him, he orders the killing of all the baby boys in Bethlehem. And to get out of town just in time, Joseph is warned by God to go south. Herod wants to kill this baby. He wants to kill the Messiah. And it's interesting to me, it's such a dark story in the Christmas narrative. We just, we read Christmas, and the story of the shepherds just always is the warmest story to me of this whole part of these nobodies being called into the town of Bethlehem and joining around in that manger scene. And then the angelic beings in the possible millions showing in the sky that night and worshiping with the shepherds. We have these warm, amazing Christmas traditional views of the narrative, the birth story, of course. But the dark story of Christmas is this story of Herod and what he wants to do, the length he will go to put an end to this baby, this new king supposedly who's been born. And isn't it interesting that no one in Bethlehem could make room for Jesus to be born? And how desperate the people of Bethlehem become in a short amount of time for rescue from this horror that is descending upon their little town. How the story changes so quickly from not making room. The only room that was made really for Jesus was in a barn stable. A horse's trough is where Jesus is laid. And yet, with the horror of this collision around the town of Bethlehem, the darkness, the control of planet Earth, the pain, the hurt that is part of the Christmas story is matched with God's determination to love the outsider. And that is precisely what brings Mary and Joseph and Jesus back to this same land. When Herod dies, Joseph is told by God and directed, you can come home now. Bring Jesus back because Herod is dead. And you would think the safe thing would be to just stay near the Nile in Egypt. Stay where it's safe, where you'll have a happy life and can thrive, where the economy seemed to be better than in so many parts of Israel. Why come back? And the consistent answer, page after page after page, the life of Jesus with every turn, with every step that Jesus takes, is to rescue the outsider, to love the broken, to welcome the hurting, the lonely, the irreligious to his table. And so on this Christmas week, as we're preparing here in just a few days for Christmas Eve, I just want to ask you, what is it that you'll do right now to make room for the outsider? Listen, we're not playing games. This isn't like nice little church stories anymore. This is about becoming part of the incarnation. You are called the hands, the feet, the mouth, the love of Jesus in this world. We can choose to let Jesus just be the incarnational story, and it really keeps us on the outside. It keeps us in kind of that religious space of trying to be good, going to church when we can, trying to pay attention, hoping to be encouraged. Or we can choose to step into the incarnational story, the actual God on earth story. And it's a mystery, and none of us are perfect, and none of us would say we're worthy, except that Jesus calls us worthy to be part of his family. And as part of his family, we represent him in this world. And so in this Christmas season, I'm calling you, I'm asking you, I'm challenging you to say yes to making room for the outsider, to stepping with Jesus toward the hurting, toward the person who needs a friend, who needs time, just somebody to sit and talk with. What is it that you'll give up? Do you have it in you to give up one evening a week, to change your schedule, to change your calendar, to approach work differently so that you have margin enough to be available, to get to know neighbors, maybe to sacrifice one of your kids' couple of sports events, or maybe 2 or 3 sports teams that they're on. I mean, at some point, we've got to work margin into our lives so we can get to know people, and we can be available, and we can be interruptible, and we can sit with people and not just take dinner. By the way, thank you to so many people. Kenny, who's approaching a surgery, and so many of you at Dulles know Kenny. Such a dear friend to so many. He's awaiting the surgery coming up, and we've been providing meals, a lot of us have, and he's been so thankful and just saying, oh my gosh, I don't even know who she was, or I don't know who he is, or that family, but please thank them for me. You know, taking dinner to someone is the first step, but maybe it's time for you to invite someone to your home, invite someone to your dinner table. Actually make room at your table for someone. This is the way of Jesus. And I just want to close with this. The night that Jesus was arrested, he invited his disciples to one last dinner before the cross. And part of that dinner was to prepare them for what the cross would mean, the breaking the bread and the pouring of the wine. But he also washed their feet that night. He took the role of the servant at the door, cleaning their feet as they came into a special dinner to dine with him and break bread in this amazing picture again of friendship with Jesus, with God. And after washing their feet, he says to them, now you must be like me. Now you must wash the feet of others. You're not a part of me if you don't. If all you do is listen, if all you do is attend church when you can and you try to be encouraged, that's a consumerism approach to my kingdom. Actually, living in my kingdom is now turning and washing the feet of others. You're allowing me to serve you. You're allowing Jesus to serve you. Well, now you must walk with him. You must be him. You must Emulate him to the outsider by washing the feet of others, by being an encourager, by sitting at coffee with, by welcoming into your home, welcoming to your table the outsider. This is what changes the world. And this is God with us. So as we approach Christmas Eve, I invite you, I plead with you, I'm challenging you to get up out of your seat and offer your seat. That's the story of Luke 14. We get up from our seat and say, hey, there's room for you. Here, have my seat. And that doesn't remove you. That doesn't put distance between you and what God's doing. It makes you more a part of what he's doing. You're actually a servant alongside Jesus. You're a host with Jesus now, serving the outsiders. That's my Christmas wish for you, for me, for our tribe and family that we call Dulles, that we would truly be those who make room for the outsider. I love you, church family. We've got Christmas Eve coming up, of course. If you're in the Dulles area, we're going to be online like normal. It's going to be a shorter gathering. We're going to share some memories from the past online. I've got a new message this Christmas Eve for those who join us out of town or those who join us online. But if you're anywhere in the Dulles area, I'm telling you, in person is so much more energetic. It's where we're encouraging each other. Our band has been just killing it this fall with our music. A lot of rehearsals. I know there's 3 or 4 rehearsals that our band are doing this week alone for Christmas Eve. So join us Christmas Eve at Lightridge High School at 5 p.m. I love you guys. Either way, in person or here online, I'll see you on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas, everybody.